You prepared for that conversation, not just mentally. You rehearsed it in the shower. You practiced it on the drive over. You rewrote the first sentence 7 times in your head until it sounded calm enough, reasonable enough, unkillable enough. You walked in with clarity. You had the specific thing they did, the date, the words they used, the exact way it made you feel. And 8 minutes later, you were apologizing. Not because you were wrong, but because somehow the conversation had become about how much they were hurting, how much they'd been carrying, how they couldn't believe you would come to them like this, after everything. You walked in with a case. You walked out as the defendant. And the worst part wasn't the apology. The worst part was you meant it. There is a specific move that certain people make, so consistent, so predictable, that once you understand it, it rewires how you see everything. You bring up something real. They bring up something older. You express hurt. They express devastation. You cry. They cry harder. And somehow, the original thing you came to address disappears completely. Not resolved, not addressed, just gone. Absorbed into their pain like it never existed. Psychologists call it DARVO. Deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. But that term is too clean for what it actually feels like. What it actually feels like is someone burning your house down and then weeping at the smoke while asking you why you're being so dramatic about the fire. The truly terrifying part? Half the time, they genuinely believe their version. They're not sitting somewhere calculating. They're not thinking, how do I flip this? Their brain has already rewritten what happened. Their nervous system has already cast them as the wounded party, and they are fully committed to that role, which makes them impossible to argue with. Because you can't win an argument against someone's sincerely held pain, even if they manufactured it. Here's what most videos miss. This isn't about manipulation the way we usually imagine it. It's not calculated. It's not cold. It's something much older, much more desperate. Underneath the confidence, underneath the charm, underneath the way they perform certainty in every room they enter, there is a self-image held together by something fragile, something that cannot withstand being wrong. When you say, "What you did hurt me," they don't hear a complaint about behavior. They hear a verdict about their character. They hear, "You are fundamentally broken." And a person whose entire identity depends on being good cannot sit with that verdict, cannot process it, cannot hold it. So their mind does what survival always does. It finds an exit. And victimhood is the fastest exit that exists, because a victim didn't cause the harm. A victim is the one receiving it. A victim gets comfort. A victim gets the benefit of the doubt. The moment they become the victim, they are no longer the one being examined. You are. This is why nothing ever gets resolved. It's not stubbornness. It's not cruelty. It's a nervous system that cannot metabolize accountability, so it converts it every single time. Here's the part that explains why you stayed so long and why walking away felt like something was wrong with you. They don't do this the same way every time. That's what makes it so hard to name. It shifts. It adapts. It wears different faces depending on the audience. The historical pivot. You bring up last week. Suddenly, they're talking about something from 8 months ago, something you thought was resolved, something you apologized for already, and the conversation has migrated completely. You're now defending a past version of yourself. The original issue evaporated. You didn't consent to that transition. It just happened, while you were still trying to be heard. The suffering escalation. You say you're tired. They've been exhausted for years. You say something hurt you. They've been hurting silently this whole time. You didn't even know. Whatever you bring to the table, theirs is heavier, older, more valid. It's not a conversation. It's a pain competition. And they will always win, because they need to win. The digital performance. You don't hear from them for 3 days, but you see the Instagram story, the vague one, the quote about betrayal, the song lyric about being misunderstood, posted at midnight. No names, but you know. And you were supposed to know. That's the entire point. Accountability never comes from them directly. It comes through atmosphere, through implication, through making you feel watched and judged and guilty without a single direct conversation. The witness recruitment. By the time you realize what happened, 3 people you care about have already heard their version, and their version had details yours didn't. Specifically, the details that made them the victim and you the cause. They didn't just share what happened, they performed it tearfully. To the exact people whose opinion matters most to you. You're not just losing the argument, you're losing the jury. This is the part people don't want to examine, because examining it means looking at yourself. You fell for it because you are not like them. When you see someone in pain, you respond to the pain. That's not weakness. That's what emotionally healthy people do. But here's what they understood before you did. Your empathy was the mechanism. The moment they performed suffering, your nervous system shifted. You stopped prosecuting. You started soothing. And the original conversation was over. You spent more time preparing for their reaction than the actual issue. You checked your tone before you texted. You deleted paragraphs. You softened every sentence until it barely resembled what you actually meant. Not because you were unsure, because you already knew what would happen if you said it plainly. You'd become the problem. And some part of you had learned it was easier to not bring it up at all. So you didn't. You swallowed it again, and your silence got interpreted as peace, and the behavior continued, and you started wondering if maybe you were the difficult one. Over time, something very specific happens. You stop trusting your own memory, not because your memory is wrong, but because your memory has been argued with so many times that it starts to feel unreliable. You remember something clearly, they remember it differently, and because they remember it with such certainty, such wounded conviction, you start wondering if maybe you misread it. Maybe you were too sensitive. Maybe you took it the wrong way. That specific doubt is the most lasting damage. Not the arguments, not the exhaustion, not even the loneliness of being in that dynamic. The doubt, because the doubt follows you out into your next relationship, into your friendships, into the way you second-guess your own reactions for years afterward. You find yourself apologizing quickly in new situations, not because you did something wrong, but because apologizing became reflexive, because it ended the tension, because it was the fastest way to make the atmosphere safe again. You learned to prioritize their emotional weather over your own reality, and that learning doesn't disappear just because the relationship does. There is something nobody tells you about finally understanding this dynamic. It doesn't feel like relief, not at first. It feels like grief, because understanding it means accepting something, that the conversations you kept trying to have were never going to land the way you needed them to, that the apologies you received were exits, not acknowledgments, that the person you kept trying to reach was unreachable, not because they didn't care about you, but because caring about you would have required them to care about their impact on you. And that kind of caring requires a level of self-honesty they were never capable of. So they did what they always do. They became the victim of the attempt, and you became the person who tried over and over, with evidence, with patience, with love. You walked into those conversations genuinely believing that if you just found the right words, the right tone, the right moment, something would shift, something would finally be seen. And I think somewhere in you, you still believe that. That's not a flaw. That's the evidence that you were the one who was actually willing to try, the one who actually cared enough to keep showing up, the one who believed that love meant working through things. They just never told you that for them, working through things meant making sure you were the one doing all the work. If this video put words to something you've been carrying for a long time, give it a like. It takes 1 second, and it puts this in front of someone who is still inside it, still apologizing for things they didn't do, still wondering if they're the problem. Subscribe to MindForge And tell me in the comments, have you ever apologized just to make the tension stop? Just say, yes, I'll read every one. See you in the next one.